All right, listeners, get ready for a deep dive. This time, we're tackling the mystery of the house that never slept.
Ooh, interesting. And our only source material.
One spooky podcast episode. It's called Whispers in the Dark.
It sounds promising.
It's got all the good stuff. Unexplained noises, shadowy figures, and a family fleeing their home in terror. Let's see if we can untangle it all, shall we?
Investigating an investigation. Love it. It's like we're peeling back the layers, trying to figure out, is this real? Is it made up? What's
Yeah.
really going on?
Right. Okay, so the story starts with a family, the Carvers, moving into a new place. Elmwood Lane is the address.
Elmwood Lane.
Elmwood. It feels almost deliberate, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like a little nod to Elm Street and, all those creepy vibes.
Yeah. Names have power, right? I mean, just hearing Elmwood Lane already sets a certain tone, even before anything spooky happens.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you've got the husband, Daniel, joking about spooky vibes as they're moving in.
Yeah.
Like, is that just a funny line?
Yeah.
Or is it foreshadowing? It makes you wonder, were they kind of expecting something weird to happen?
Right, like they were almost asking for it. But at first, things seem pretty normal, except for this strange smell that the wife, Melissa, keeps noticing. Kind of sour.
Ooh, yeah. I remember that.
That sensory detail, the smell, it's so powerful in a story like this, Creates this whole atmosphere.
Totally. And the smell, it doesn't go away. It gets worse. Then they start hearing footsteps up in the attic above their bedroom. Classic haunted house stuff, right?
Totally. But here's the thing. It's always unseen, right? We hear the footsteps, but never actually see what's making them. It plays on that fear of the unknown.
Oh, absolutely. Much creepier than if, like, a ghost just popped out and said, boo.
Exactly. It's like, what's lurking up there? What's just out of sight?
And then poor Ethan, the son, he has this terrifying encounter with, he calls it a shadow man.
The Shadow Man. It's a classic, isn't it? Appears in so many cultures' folklore, like some kind of universal symbol of fear.
For sure. And Ethan, he gets it in his head that the house itself is angry, wants them gone. What do you make of that? Not just a ghost, but the whole house is the bad guy.
That's a really interesting idea, right? The house has a character with its own motivations and, evil plans. Makes you wonder about the nature of haunting itself. Is it an entity that's attached to a place? Or could it be something in the structure itself, something that absorbs bad vibes?
And it turns out Melissa does some digging into the house's history. Other families lived there before, but they all left because of similar creepy stuff. Whispers, shadows. It's like the same nightmares playing out over and over again.
It's this recurring theme of an unwelcome presence, the house pushing people out. So what's the root of the problem? A ghost tied to the house, bad energy built up over time, or something else entirely. What do you think is causing these events? I'm curious.
Me too. I'm leaning toward the bad energy theory. It's like the walls are just soaked in fear and negativity, and it's coming out in these physical ways, like the smell, the shadows.
I can see that. And then Melissa has her own terrifying experience, or that's where the story gets really intense.
Totally. It's late at night. She's all alone in the house. And suddenly, the temperature drops. That sour smell gets even stronger.
Ooh, yeah, again with those sensory details, they really put you in her shoes, feeling the chills.
And then she hears it. A whisper. Saying, get out. Like the house itself is talking to her, warning her. And when she turns toward the voice, she sees it. A shadowy figure in the corner, just staring at her.
That's so creepy. But it's even more unsettling because the figure doesn't do anything, right? It doesn't attack, just watches. I think what we don't see is always scarier than what we do.
100%. And, well, the Carvers, they do exactly what that voice told them to do. They get out, they leave the next morning, leaving everything behind.
Can you imagine being so scared that you just leave all your stuff? Everything.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It really shows how terrified they were. Like, their sanity was at stake. But them leaving like that, it adds to the whole mystery. So many questions. Why did the house target them? What happened to the families who lived there before? And is that presence still there? Because the podcast says the house is still empty. But people say they see lights flickering, shadows moving in the windows.
It's like the house really never sleeps, even empty. There's something going on, something unresolved. A giant question mark.
Chills, man, chills. Okay, so to recap, we've got escalating paranormal activity, a house with a dark history, and a family driven out by fear. But so far, way more questions than answers.
And that's where things get really interesting. We're forced to think critically. What do we believe? What's even possible? What's jumped out at you so far?
Good question. What about you? Have you started to form any theories about what might be going on in the house that never slept?
I have a few ideas.
Oh, I bet you do. Well, listeners, stick with us because we're about to go even deeper into this mystery in part 2 of our deep dive. I keep thinking about that idea we talked about. You know, the house itself, being aware, like having a consciousness, not just haunted, but actually sentient. Is that, I don't know, is it too out there?
Not necessarily. I mean, we usually think of hauntings as ghosts, spirits, that kind of thing. But what if it's the location itself that's the problem? What if the house is like a living thing?
And in this case, it seems like it's still putting on a show, even after the family left. Remember, people still report seeing lights and shadows. Is that just like leftover energy? Or is it something more intentional?
Good question. Is it just reacting, like some kind of defense mechanism? Or is it deliberately trying to scare people away? And if so, why? What's it protecting?
Maybe it's protecting its own memories. You know what I mean? Like, places hold on to traces of the past, right? Think about battlefields, places where tragedies happened, or even places where, great joy happened. There's often a feeling that something lingers there.
Yeah, you can totally feel it sometimes. And with this house, those lingering traces seem to have become paranormal activity. Smells, sounds, the shadow figures. It's like it's trying to say something, but we don't speak the language.
Yeah. Like, what do you think it's trying to say?
Maybe it's a warning. Get out. This is mine, and I don't want you here. Like an animal defending its territory.
I like that. It fits with that whole idea of the house is a living thing. It's got its own boundaries, its own defenses. But what makes someone a threat to a house?
Yeah.
What triggers that?
Yeah.
Is it just being physically there? Or could it be something more than that? Like your intention when you're there?
Ooh, interesting. So you're saying it's not just about being in the house, it's about what you bring with you, your emotions, your energy, your reasons for being there. Maybe that's what sets it off.
Hmm, I could see that.
Hmm.
We know that emotions can affect our surroundings, right?
Yeah.
Think about how the atmosphere in a room changes depending on who's there and how they're feeling.
Hmm.
So what if those emotions can, like, leave a mark?
An energetic residue, yeah.
Yeah.
And it sticks around even after the people are gone.
So maybe the house that never slept is just super sensitive to that kind of stuff because of its history, all the things that have happened there.
Makes sense. And if a house can be like that, what about other things? Trees, rocks? I mean, what about the earth itself? Does that have a kind of consciousness too?
Okay, now you're getting a little far out there for me.
Okay.
But I get your point. The house in this story, it's not just a setting. It's a character. It's part of the story. And that's what makes it so interesting. It makes us rethink what's real, what's possible. The lines between the seen and unseen, the living and the, well, not living.
Exactly. It makes us wonder if we really are alone in the world or if there are other ways of being, other kinds of consciousness that we don't even understand yet.
So where do we go from here? We've explored the story. We've analyzed it. We've talked about all these big ideas. What's next?
I think it's your turn, listeners. What really stuck with you in this story? What are you thinking about?
Yeah. Does this make you question what's real? The boundaries between what we can see and what we can't? Or are you more interested in the psychological side of things? Like how powerful fear is and how it can mess with our perceptions?
Maybe you're even feeling inspired to do a little exploring yourself. Every town has its own legends, its own haunted places. What stories are hiding in your own backyard?
We'd love to hear your thoughts, your theories, anything. We're all in this together, exploring these mysteries.
And who knows, maybe you'll have an insight that helps us understand the house that never slept a little better.
Great idea. But before we wrap up completely, let's dive into some possible explanations for what's happening in this house. Like, if we were investigating this ourselves, where would we even start? What kind of evidence would we look for? We'll tackle those questions and more in part 3 of our deep dive. So we've talked about how the house that never slept might be a little more than just, your average haunted house. But let's say we wanted to investigate this ourselves. Where would we even begin? What are we looking for?
Well, I definitely want to dig into the history of the house. Were there any, traumatic events, accidents, violence? Maybe even just a lot of really intense emotions. All of that can, leave an imprint.
Makes you think, right? What if the house isn't actually evil? What if it's just stuck replaying these events over and over again? And maybe that's what people are sensing. The fear, the sadness, the anger, all kind of swirling around.
Yeah, like an echo of the past. That's a cool way to think about it. I'd love to compare what happened to the different families who lived there. Did they all experience the same things, the same feelings? Did they see the same, stuff?
I'd want to talk to anyone who's related to the people who lived there before, too. Maybe there are family stories, legends, or even old news articles that could tell us more.
Great idea. Every little detail could be a clue. And of course, we can't forget about all the cool tech that paranormal investigators use these days, like those EMF readers, to pick up on weird energy fluctuations.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And what about those EVP recorders? The
Yeah.
ones that can pick up voices and stuff. It's kind of creepy. But imagine if we could actually get a message from the house or whatever's living there.
Right. That would be amazing. It could help us understand how these energies, these whatever they are, how they communicate. Of course, the tricky part with all of this is, how do you prove it's real? Is that a ghost voice or is it just static?
That's where it gets hard, right?
Yeah.
How do you measure something that might not even exist in the way we understand things? It's like trying to take a picture of a dream.
Exactly. That's why you got to be both curious and skeptical, open to the possibilities, but also ready to really examine the evidence. What else could explain it?
So even if we didn't find, like, definite proof of a haunting, just the process of investigating this house would be so interesting. We'd be learning about history, psychology, even consciousness itself.
Totally. And maybe that's the most important thing to remember. It's not about proving or disproving ghosts. It's about opening our minds to all the mysteries out there.
And respecting them. I like that. Well, listeners, that's the end of our deep dive into the house that never slept. Thanks for coming along with us on this spooky adventure.
Keep your minds open, everyone. Stay curious. And maybe next time you're in an old building, listen carefully. You never know what stories those walls might be whispering.
Sleep tight. And thanks for joining us on the deep dive.